Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, Kim Miller preached and he talked about how he has a ministry of chaos and confusion. But I love the way he just brings it all back together and it all makes sense in the end. And so I'm going to bring a bit of chaos and confusion at the start, but be patient. It's going to come. It's going to come. So for those of you who might not know, I'm a photographer by trade, and so I have been afforded a very good opportunity of being able to go overseas and photograph in some really, really crazy, unique places. And so one of the things that always really resonates with my heart is the great contrast. Like these, I experience these really insane contrasts. And so, for example, even like my own photography is a part of that contrast, and it's my role and my job to create these visually impacting images that draw people in, yet the places where I take them of great inequity, disparity, and poverty, you know. So you've got these images of impact versus where I take them. It's these great contrasts. And I'm going to show you a couple just to give you guys a little bit of context about my talk this morning. We're going to go through a couple of them. There's a few that I'm going to reference a little bit today. So we'll just, Tonya, if you can flick some of these up. So recently, if you don't know, many of you know, I was in Tanzania recently photographing for Compassion, which is a child sponsorship organisation, and I go over there and help build them a library so that they can use them in social media posts and all that sort of stuff. And then after that I went to India. We went back and revisited a place where we lived and went for a reunion over there, so you'll see a couple of images over there. So we'll just flick through them. So that was the marketplace in Tanzania that I was just packing up. Some of the kids from the Compassion projects, some of the Maasai tribes people where we were documenting a story there. This is like their village. The little kids, their role is to herd all the goats and all the cattle around the place. So this was, we recreated, this is a young girl by the name of Apendo and Jennifer, her mum. And this is where they collect their water. So before Compassion sponsored a water tank into the local church, this is where they got their drinking water and water that they cooked and cleaned with. I'm going to reference this image. So this was when they welcomed us into the village and the church. It was crazy compact. Everyone's jumping up and dancing like maniacs. I'll come back to that image. There's one of the mothers of the village. So then we jump over to India. Now these images were a couple in India that we took. That was a marketplace there. That was crazy. It was just so insane, dirty and smelly. So some people showering, all right, or cleaning themselves there. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So as I said, there's these great contrasts that I experience, and one of those contrasts is in our culture we've become accustomed to we've become accustomed to certain privileges that we have in our life. So for example, I have a mate who's a missionary in Myanmar. The place is currently in civil war. He's actually going to come and speak here in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about. He's got a daughter. She was born in Myanmar. She's 4 years old. They've come back for a furlough, and one of the first comments that his daughter made was like, "Oh, Dad, the electricity's always on here," and he went to turn the lights off, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, the power's gone out," and he was like, "Oh, no, that's just the light switch. We can control it and turn it on." So she, one of her observations was she was just so blown away that there's consistent power here. He's told me that during, when the war gets crazy over there, they have 5 minutes a day sometimes of power, which is crazy, and the houses aren't built really well, so they get extremely hot, and it just gets chaotically hot. So another one of those privileges that we have is access to water. We have access to clean water, and I hope that you utilize that clean water really well by cleaning yourself, showering at least once a day, which I try to do, sometimes twice if I'm lucky. But when you don't have access to a whole lot of water, you don't have time, you're unable to clean your clothes, and you're unable to wash. And so one of the challenges that I face over there when I go do this is the intense smells. right? And so you go, when we're in that church and they're welcoming us, they're dancing around, it gets really smelly. You can imagine how intense it is, right? And it was funny because I'm dancing around. I'm like, oh man, I was having a bit of a pity party. I'm like, these smells are just crazy. And then I was reminded, I don't know if it was Holy Spirit, but I was reminded that I forgot to take deodorant to Tanzania. So I was like, oh man, they're probably thinking the same thing as me. Like, there's this stinky ginger Westerner dancing around. He smells really bad. And so it can get really challenging out there. When we lived in India, we lived in an apartment block. And when we lived about 1 kilometre and a bit from where I worked. And so I had two routes that I could take to work. I could go the back streets, which were really cool, or I could walk along the main road in amongst the noise, the dust, the pollution. And most of the time I chose that was because to get to the back alleys, I had to do 300 metres of a slum. There was a slum that was behind our apartment block, and they used that 300-metre alleyway as a toilet, and the smells were just crazy. It was so intense. So I would just be like, I'd rather walk in the chaos of the dust and the noise and stuff like that. And so when we at our workplace, and then I had to leave that workplace to go pick up the kids at school, I would have to take this route. And so one of the crazy things in Kolkata where we lived, they don't have a rubbish system, right? And I kind of get into it. Meg gets upset at me. But you just take your rubbish and you just chuck it into the gutter. It feels quite satisfying. You're just chucking this rubbish. And Meg's like, carry it, put it in your pocket. I'm like, no, and just chuck it in there. But what happens in the morning is people come and sweep it up, and they sweep it up and then put it into wheelbarrows, and they push the wheelbarrows to a corner of particular places around the city, which is a literal tip. And then families live around that, and they go through the rubbish and collect out anything that's necessary. But the smell coming out of that is insane. It's unbearable. And so when I used to walk, I'd have to walk past one of these, and there was a spot where I knew I could take a breath, and then I knew when I released it. So I would take it and walk past and then release it, and I would not get any of the fumes or the intense craziness of the smells that would come through. And so when you're over there, that's one of the challenges. You face these intense smells. But what I feel like is harder to deal with literal smells is to deal with the smell of intent, okay? Intent has a smell. And so, for example, over there, one guy, while I was over there, comes up to me, and I could smell it straight away. I knew what was going to happen. He came up to me, he's like, Jake, I want to show you around. And so the whole time he's showing me around, and I go, come on, get to the point. 20 minutes later, here it comes, boom, money. Can you do this? Sponsors, give us money, give us that. And he had no intent of he was trying to build a relationship really quickly, so he could just get to the point of asking for money. And so I just knew, I could smell it straight away. And so our intentions have a smell. And David in Psalm 38 says in the and I love the ESV translation of it. I think we've got it up here. It says, for my iniquities have gone over my head. Like a heavy burden, they are too heavy for me. My wounds stink and fester because of my foolishness. David knows that our actions and the way we posture ourselves has a smell. And so when I have the opportunity to do these trips, the initial excitement of being in a new culture and environment can wear off really quickly. And so when I'm away, I can just get laser focused, right? Because I'm contracted to go over there, be a photographer, take photos, and sometimes I just want to get. My intention is just to get the job done, right? And so I can push people. I can have that posture of like, don't speak to me. I just want to get my job done. Don't talk to me. And so as the trips go on a little bit, your wick can get short, and sometimes that dripping tap, it becomes like a rushing wave. And so, for example, the harshness of environment, the intensity of the smells, the long periods of waiting, the soreness your body gets from doing these massive days, up early, late nights, the challenges of dealing with different cultures, and then all of a sudden your wick becomes really short, you start getting annoyed with the people around you, and your intentions change. My intentions start becoming very focused on myself and my entitlements, what I need. And you can become short with the people on your team who you have the same goal to achieve over there. And so while I was away in Tanzania, I think to preempt this, I felt like God spoke to me. And he said to me, Jake, he spoke to me around my intentions and my aroma. How are you going to smell, Jake? He says, Jake, I want you to stink of love. I want you to stink of love. And so today, the title of my message is Stink of Love. And so how I felt like how he communicated this to me was through this verse in 1 chapter 13. It's really powerful and it's really confronting when you apply it to your own life, and especially in difficult situations. And so I want to read it out. I want you guys, you can read it quietly to yourself and just let it sink in and minister to yourself. But I'm going to read it now. So, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have and I deliver up my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist in its own way. That one hit me hard. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So the question for me becomes, well, how do I, and what is the best way that I can build a foundation of love into my everyday life, especially when I'm in a unique environment? How do I live a life that stinks like love? And so I wrestled over this, and I realized there's some stuff that I needed to deal with. And I know many of you in this place have had similar experiences to me, in which our mother or father didn't care or look after us like the way they should have. We loved our parents, however, that love wasn't returned. And it came back in forms of hurts and pains and challenges and difficulties. And so as children, we learn how to build walls, and we learn how to callous our hearts to protect ourselves. And you learn that if I don't open up myself, I can't be hurt. If I don't open up, I can't be hurt. And we become really good at building these walls, and we learn how to build them quickly. All right? I know. I've seen many of you, because it takes one to know one. I don't know if anyone remembers a movie back in the 80s called Tango and Cash. Tango and Cash, with Sly Stallone and Kurt Russell, I think. Kurt Russell, yeah. And I remember watching this movie as a kid, and I had this moment where I think it's Sly turns to Kurt and he says, mate, don't trust anyone. Don't trust. And I remember as a kid watching that movie and going, what an epic philosophy. What an epic philosophy, because if I don't trust anyone, I'm not going to get hurt. And so I lived, I wasn't brought up in a Christian home, so I lived with that philosophy. But the problem with building walls and allowing our hearts to callous is that the walls and hard hearts trap all kinds of grime. And the grime is envy, bitterness, anger, and unforgiveness. And so as we walk as Christians with other Christians, we can become tempted to build these walls and build them fast. And so we have this challenge when we read this verse. It can create some really warm and fuzzies inside. However, the practicals aspects of living that out can be a real challenge. And when you start to stink of love, to some people, that's the smell of death. As Paul says in 2 Corinthians, that those who are perishing, we are the aroma of death. There are people out there who won't understand your Christian walk. There are people out there who are going to you are going to be the aroma of death. There will be people who take advantage of you. There are people who will think you're just stupid. I've had plenty of that one. There are people who will just hate your aroma. And when you decide to love, it can be guaranteed that your life will not be all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. Loving like Christ is not riding a horse on White Sands Beach holding with your partner. That's not love. Or it can be. And when you love, you will suffer wounds and there's collateral damage. And you'll want to build the walls quickly, and we'll want to go back to our philosophy of don't trust anyone. Your walls and your calloused heart will seem like a warm blanket on a very cold day. But what I love about Christ is that he offers us a path and a way that doesn't make sense in the natural world. It's a paradox in the natural. People who don't understand the love of Christ just won't get it or won't understand it. But it's the supernatural power and the love of Christ that heals our wounds that are caused by love. So you love, then you get hurt by love, and then it's love that heals those wounds. But I know that sounds a little bit awkward, but I love the way Leo Tolstoy puts it, and we'll put that up there. He says, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow, but this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heal them. You can't outlove the amount of love God has the ability to give you. I love what it says in Psalm 40:11. As for you, O Lord, you will not restrain your mercy from me. Your steadfast love and your faithfulness will ever preserve me. Meister Eckhart says, whatever God does, the first outburst is always compassion. If you lean in, God is leaning in with compassion and love. That's his nature. It's love that preserves us. It's the way we love one another that tells us apart from the world. When we love, it begets love. Love grows love. The verse in 2 Corinthians talks about that when we operate out of the love of Christ, then we are the aroma of Christ to God. And to other Christians, we are the fragrance of life. It's perfect love that casts out all fear. It's perfect love that heals our wounds. It's perfect love that conquers the corrupt ways of the world. The corrupt strategy of the world is power and control. Out of this desire for power and control flow horrible evils like envy, bitterness, injustice, anger. And we all can get caught up in it. We all can. But Jesus' impact on the world was so profound because of the example he showed us on how to combat that power and control. It's so profound because not only does it impact us on our spiritual life and our soul's life, he shows us how to combat it here in the natural while on earth, dealing with situations that you and I face every day. His disciples initially thought that he was going to fight power and control with more power. The Jews wanted Jesus dead because they thought he was going to take their power and control away. Pilate said to Jesus, do you know that I have the power to release you? The Romans thought they had the power. Jesus went to the cross to show us that the way to defeat the corrupt ways of this world of selfishness, envy, injustice, all the evils is through the power of love. By building the foundations of your day on love, we counteract the ways of the world. So my challenge when I was overseas and as I've come back is to build my days on the foundation of love. God has asked me to stink of love. This can be a daily challenge. It is very easy to stink of other things. I think sometimes we can trap ourselves into this thinking pattern that if we lean into love, that our only reward is in heaven. And that we must brutally suffer and struggle through our life. However, I am finding that the more I choose to spend time learning on how to love like Jesus loved, the door of opportunity is opening. As I lean into the love of Christ, I see opportunity. And it's the opportunity to see what God is doing. When I love, he blesses me with the opportunity to see what he's doing in my family's life. What he's doing in my kids' life. What he's doing in your life. What he's doing in places like Tanzania and India. But he blesses me with something even greater, and that's to experience his love. When I empty myself of love, when I receive a wound from loving, then he replenishes it with his love. And that's supernatural. It's the way of the kingdom here on earth. The way we love here on earth will be celebrated in heaven. Not how many likes we get on TikTok, not how many dollars we have in the bank, not what you achieve in this world, but by the way you love. As Corinthians 13 says, love is the greatest. So my question to you, my question to us is, what is our spiritual BO? Are we going to stink of bitterness? Are we going to stink of love? Are we going to stink of anger? Are we going to stink of selfishness? Or is your intent the stink of love? Intent has a smell. People respond to how you are being, not what you're doing. Our intentions matter, and they matter a lot. So I want you to wrestle with it. I want you to chew on it through the week. Read over 1 Corinthians 13 and ask yourself the question, what is your spiritual BO? All right, Life Church. God bless you all.